Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of the training compound, her heart pounding against her ribs as she watched the other Navy SEALs finish their morning run. The California sun was already blazing hot at 7 in the morning, and sweat dripped down her forehead despite the early hour. She had been dreaming of this moment for 3 years, ever since the military opened combat roles to women. Today was her first day with Team 7, and she could feel 20 pairs of eyes watching her every move. The men jogged past her in perfect formation, their boots hitting the ground in rhythm. Most of them barely glanced in her direction, but she caught the smirks on several faces. She had heard the whispers during her first week at the base. The guys called her Barbie behind her back, making jokes about how long she would last before washing out. Some bet she would quit within a month. Others gave her 2 weeks. Sarah had graduated at the top of her class from BUD-S training, the grueling 6-month program that turned regular sailors into Navy SEALs. Out of the 180 men who started with her, only 23 finished. She was the only woman. But passing BUD-S was just the beginning. Now she had to prove herself all over again with an operational team. Commander Jake Morrison, the team leader, approached her with a clipboard in his hand. Morrison was a legend in the SEAL community, with 15 years of experience and more successful missions than anyone could count. His weathered face showed the stress of leading men into dangerous situations across the globe. He stopped in front of Sarah and looked her up and down, his expression unreadable. "Martinez," he said, his voice gruff. "Welcome to Team 7. I hope you're ready for the real world. Because training is over. We have a mission briefing in 1 hour, and then we deploy to Afghanistan in 3 days." Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked Morrison directly in the eyes. "Yes, sir. I'm ready for whatever you throw at me." Morrison nodded slowly. "We'll see about that. First, you need to meet the rest of the team." He gestured toward the group of SEALs who were now stretching after their run. These men have been working together for 2 years. They trust each other with their lives. You're the unknown factor now. As they walked toward the group, Sarah could hear snippets of conversation. The words weren't meant for her ears, but in the military, secrets were hard to keep. "Great. Now we have to babysit a rookie," muttered Petty Officer First Class Tony Rodriguez, a stocky man with arms covered in tattoos. He was the team's explosives expert and had a reputation for speaking his mind. "I heard she's only here because of politics," added Petty Officer Second Class Mike Chen, the communications specialist. "The brass wants to look good for the media." Sarah felt her jaw clench, but she kept walking. She had expected this reaction. During her time in BUD-S, she had faced similar comments from instructors and fellow trainees. The difference was that those men eventually saw her capabilities during training exercises. This team would need to learn the hard way. Morrison called the group together. "Listen up, gentlemen. This is Petty Officer Martinez. She's our new addition, and she'll be taking the place of Stevens, who transferred to Team 3. Stevens had been their sniper, and Sarah knew that filling his shoes would be her biggest challenge. The team leader pointed to each man as he introduced them. Besides Rodriguez and Chen, there was Petty Officer First Class David "Tank" Thompson, a massive man who served as their heavy weapons specialist. Petty Officer Second Class Kevin "Ghost" Williams was their reconnaissance expert, known for his ability to move silently through any terrain. The medic was Petty Officer First Class Alex "Doc" Turner, a calm and steady man who had saved more lives than he could remember. "Martinez will be our new sniper," Morrison announced. She scored the highest marks in marksmanship during her advanced training. Rodriguez let out a short laugh. "Shooting targets on a range is different from shooting real enemies who shoot back, Commander." Sarah stepped forward. "I'm aware of that, Petty Officer Rodriguez. I'm also aware that my scores were higher than anyone on this team, including Stevens." The comment created an uncomfortable silence. Rodriguez's face reddened, and Tank Thompson shook his head in disapproval. Sarah realized she might have made a mistake by being so direct, but she couldn't take the words back now. Morrison broke the tension. "Scores don't mean everything in the field, Martinez, but we'll find out what you're made of soon enough. Everyone, gear up for the briefing." As the team dispersed to collect their equipment, Ghost Williams approached Sarah. Unlike the others, he seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile. "Martinez, can I give you some advice?" Sarah nodded, grateful for any guidance. "Please. These guys aren't bad people," Ghost said quietly. "But they've been through hell together. 6 months ago, we lost 2 team members in a firefight in Iraq. Stevens saved Rodriguez's life that day by taking out 3 enemy snipers from 800 meters away. You're not just replacing a teammate. You're replacing someone who kept them alive." Sarah felt the weight of Ghost's words. She had known about the casualties, but she hadn't understood the emotional impact on the surviving team members. "I appreciate you telling me that. I know I have big shoes to fill." Ghost smiled slightly. "The thing is, they're not really angry at you. They're scared. Scared that you won't be able to do what Stevens did when their lives depend on it. Show them you can, and they'll accept you. But if you can't..." He didn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood. An hour later, the team gathered in the briefing room. The walls were covered with maps, satellite photos, and intelligence reports. Morrison stood at the front of the room next to a large screen displaying an aerial view of a compound in eastern Afghanistan. "Gentlemen and lady," Morrison began, nodding toward Sarah, "we have a high-value target mission. Intelligence has located a Taliban bomb maker responsible for several attacks on coalition forces. He's holed up in this compound with approximately 15 fighters." The commander used a laser pointer to highlight different areas of the compound. "The target is in the main building. 2nd floor. Our job is to get in, capture, or eliminate the bomb maker, and get out with minimal civilian casualties. The compound is located in a valley surrounded by hills, which gives us both advantages and disadvantages." Morrison clicked to the next slide, showing the terrain around the compound. "The good news is, we'll have overwatch positions on the hills for our sniper. The bad news is that if things go wrong, those same hills will make extraction difficult." Sarah studied the images carefully, noting the distances from potential sniper positions to the compound. The longest shot would be approximately 600 meters, well within her capabilities, but challenging under combat conditions. "What's the timeline, Commander?" asked Tank Thompson. "We insert at 0200 hours, 3 days from now," Morrison replied. "The assault team will consist of Rodriguez, Thompson, Chen, and myself. Doc will stay with the vehicles at the extraction point. Williams will provide reconnaissance and early warning from the eastern hill." Morrison paused and looked at Sarah. "Martinez will be positioned on the western hill, with overwatch responsibility for the entire operation. This means you'll be responsible for protecting the assault team if things go wrong." The room fell silent. Sarah could feel the pressure of 6 pairs of eyes on her. This wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about keeping her teammates alive during their first mission together. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. "Commander, with all due respect, wouldn't it be better to have Ghost in the overwatch position? He has more experience with this type of mission." Morrison's expression remained neutral. "Ghost will be busy with reconnaissance. Martinez is our designated sniper, and this is her job. Unless you're questioning my judgment, Rodriguez?" The explosives expert shook his head quickly. "No, sir. Just want to make sure we're using our assets effectively." Sarah spoke up for the first time during the briefing. "If I may, Commander, I'd like to study the satellite images and terrain maps in detail. I want to identify multiple firing positions and escape routes." Morrison nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. The intelligence office has additional photos and topographical data. I suggest you spend the next 2 days studying every inch of that valley." After the briefing ended, the team members filed out of the room, leaving Sarah alone with the maps and photos. She spread the materials across the table and began her analysis. The compound was roughly rectangular, with the main building in the center and smaller structures around the perimeter. The western hill offered several potential sniper positions, but she would need to choose carefully based on angles and concealment. As she worked, Doc Turner returned to the briefing room. "Mind if I sit down?" he asked. Sarah gestured to a chair. "Please. I could use someone to bounce ideas off." Doc pulled up a chair and examined the maps. You know, I've been with this team longer than anyone except Morrison. I've seen a lot of new guys come and go. What's your point? Sarah asked, not looking up from her calculations. My point is that the guys who succeed are the ones who think before they act, Doc said. The ones who fail are usually the ones who try to prove themselves by taking unnecessary risks. Sarah finally looked up from the maps. Are you saying I should play it safe? Doc shook his head. I'm saying you should be smart. Rodriguez and Tank are testing you right now, seeing if you'll crack under pressure. Chen is waiting to see if you'll make a mistake, but Morrison and Ghost are evaluating whether you can actually do the job. And what about you? Sarah asked. What are you looking for? Doc smiled. I'm looking for someone who will bring my teammates home alive. Everything else is just noise. Over the next 2 days, Sarah threw herself into mission preparation. She studied every available photo of the target area, memorized the distances and angles from various firing positions, and practiced her shooting at the base range. Her groupings were consistently tight, even under stress conditions designed to simulate combat. On the second day, Ghost Williams joined her at the range. He watched silently as she fired shot after shot into targets at different distances. After she finished her practice session, he approached with a thoughtful expression. Martinez, can I ask you something? Sarah set down her rifle and nodded. Shoot. Why did you want to become a SEAL? The question caught her off guard. She had been asked similar questions during interviews and psychological evaluations. But something about Ghost's tone made her think he genuinely wanted to know. Honestly, Sarah said, I want to make a difference. My brother was killed in a roadside bombing in Iraq 5 years ago. He was a Marine, and he died because the intelligence was bad. I figured if I could be the person providing overwatch, maybe I could prevent other families from losing someone they love. Ghost nodded slowly. That's a good reason. Better than most of us had when we started. Ghost. He picked up one of the spent shell casings from the ground and examined it. You know, Stevens was a great sniper, but he had one weakness. He always took the safest shot, even if it wasn't the best shot for the mission. Sometimes that put the assault team in more danger. Sarah considered this information carefully. What are you trying to tell me? I'm telling you that sometimes the new person sees things the veterans miss, Ghost said. Don't be afraid to speak up if you have a better idea, even if Rodriguez and Tank don't want to hear it. And, the night before the mission, Morrison called Sarah to his office. The commander's workspace was sparse and functional, with only a few personal photos and commendations on the walls. He gestured for her to sit across from his desk. Martinez, tomorrow will be your first real test as a member of this team, Morrison said. I want to be clear about something. I don't care that you're a woman, and I don't care about politics or public relations. I only care about one thing. Can you do the job when lives are on the line? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Yes, sir. I can do the job. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Stevens was a good SEAL, but he wasn't perfect. He saved lives, but he also missed opportunities because he was too cautious. I need someone who can think quickly and adapt to changing situations. I understand, Commander. Do you? Morrison asked. Because tomorrow, if Rodriguez or Thompson gets pinned down by enemy fire, you'll have seconds to make a decision that could save their lives or get them killed. There's no instructor standing behind you, no do-overs, no second chances. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Sir, I've been preparing for this my entire career. I won't let the team down. Morrison studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you mean that. Now get some rest. We leave at midnight. As Sarah walked back to her quarters, she thought about the conversation with Morrison and the advice from Ghost and Doc. The team members who had been hostile toward her weren't necessarily bad people. They were scared and protective of each other. She understood that now, but understanding their feelings didn't make her job any easier. She spent her final hours before the mission checking and rechecking her equipment. Her sniper rifle was a precision instrument that she had customized to her exact specifications. The scope was calibrated perfectly, and she had ammunition specifically selected for the environmental conditions they would face in Afghanistan. Her backup weapons, communications equipment, and survival gear were all organized and ready. At 11:30 p.m., Sarah made her way to the helicopter landing pad, where the rest of Team 7 was already waiting. The men were dressed in full combat gear, their faces painted with camouflage and their weapons cleaned and ready. The atmosphere was tense but professional. Morrison gathered the team around him for a final briefing. Remember, this is a capture or kill mission. We want the bomb maker alive if possible, but not at the cost of American lives. Martinez, you'll deploy first to establish overwatch. Once you're in position and confirm security, the assault team will move in. The UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter appeared in the distance, its rotors creating a rhythmic thumping sound that grew louder as it approached. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as the reality of the situation set in. This was it. Her chance to prove that she belonged with Team 7. As the helicopter landed, Rodriguez approached her. His expression was serious, rather than hostile. Martinez, I want you to know that regardless of what I said before, once we're out there, you're one of us. We watch each other's backs. No matter what. Sarah nodded. I appreciate that, Rodriguez. I won't let you down. Tank Thompson overheard the exchange and added, just remember, if you see a target, you take it. Don't hesitate because you're worried about making a mistake. Hesitation will get us killed. The team boarded the helicopter, and Sarah found herself sitting between Ghost and Doc. As the aircraft lifted off into the night sky, she looked out the window at the lights of the base growing smaller below them. In a few hours, she would either prove herself as a valuable member of Team 7, or she would become another cautionary tale about why women didn't belong in combat units. The flight to the target area would take 45 minutes. Sarah used the time to review her mental notes about the mission and visualize different scenarios. She thought about her brother and the promise she had made to herself after his funeral. She was ready to put everything on the line to protect her teammates and complete the mission. As the helicopter flew through the darkness toward Afghanistan, Sarah Martinez prepared to face the most important test of her life. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust, 2 kilometers from the target compound. Sarah was the first to exit. Her rifle slung across her back, and her night vision goggles already activated. The Afghan landscape looked alien in the green glow of the technology, all shadows and strange shapes that could hide enemies or nothing at all. Ghost Williams jumped out behind her, followed by the rest of the team. The pilot gave them a thumbs up and immediately lifted off, leaving them alone in enemy territory. The sound of the rotors faded quickly, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to press against Sarah's eardrums. Morrison checked his watch and spoke into his radio headset. Control, this is Team 7. We're on the ground and proceeding to objective. Copy, Team 7, came the response from their support base. You have a go for the mission. Weather is clear. No other friendlies in the area. Sarah adjusted her pack and began moving toward her assigned position on the western hill. The terrain was rougher than the satellite photos had suggested, with loose rocks and hidden gullies that could twist an ankle or worse. She moved carefully but quickly, knowing that the assault team was depending on her to be in position before they began their approach. The hill was a steep climb that took her 20 minutes to navigate. When she reached her predetermined firing position, Sarah was breathing hard but alert. She pulled out her spotting scope and examined the compound below. The intelligence had been accurate. She could see guards moving around the perimeter, and dim lights glowed in several of the buildings. Sarah keyed her radio. Overwatch is in position. I have eyes on the target compound. Count 6 guards visible, possibly more inside the buildings. Copy, Overwatch, Morrison replied. Ghost, report your status. Ghost is moving into position on the eastern side, Williams answered. I should be ready in 10 minutes. Sarah settled into her shooting position and began a detailed surveillance of the compound. Through her scope, she could see that the guards were carrying AK-47 rifles and wearing a mixture of military and civilian clothing. 2 of them were smoking cigarettes near the main building, clearly not expecting trouble. A 3rd guard was walking a patrol route around the perimeter. But his pattern was predictable and lazy. After 15 minutes, Ghost confirmed that he was in position and had established a clear view of the compound's eastern approach. Morrison gave the order to begin the assault. "All teams, this is 6, Morrison said, using his call sign as team leader. "We are proceeding to the objective. Overwatch, keep your eyes open." Sarah watched through her scope as 4 dark figures emerged from the shadows and began moving toward the compound. Morrison, Rodriguez, Chen, and Thompson moved like ghosts themselves, using every bit of available cover to approach their target. Their movement was so smooth and coordinated that Sarah felt a surge of pride at being part of such a professional team. The assault team reached the outer wall of the compound without being detected. Sarah could see Morrison hand-signaling to his teammates, coordinating their final approach. Rodriguez placed small explosive charges on the gate, while Thompson and Chen covered different angles. Everything was going according to plan. Then the situation changed in an instant. A door opened in one of the smaller buildings, and a guard emerged with a flashlight. He began walking directly toward the position where the assault team was preparing to breach the gate. Sarah could see through her scope that the guard would discover Morrison and his team in less than 30 seconds. 6. This is Overwatch, Sarah whispered into her radio. "You have a guard approaching your position from Building 2. Range is 40 meters and closing." Morrison's voice came back immediately. "Can you take the shot?" Sarah calculated quickly. The distance was approximately 450 meters, well within her capabilities. But the shot would alert every enemy in the compound and potentially compromise the mission. She thought about Stevens and how Ghost had said he always took the safest shot, even when it wasn't the best shot for the mission. -6. Shot would compromise the mission. Recommend you abort and reposition. There was a pause on the radio. Sarah could see the guard getting closer to Morrison's team. In her scope, she watched Rodriguez start to raise his weapon, preparing to take out the guard at close range. But that would also alert the compound and turn the mission into a firefight. Suddenly, Sarah had an idea. Instead of taking the safe shot or aborting the mission, there might be a third option. 6. I have an alternative plan, she said into her radio. "Can you delay 30 seconds? "Explain quickly," Morrison replied, his voice tense. Sarah had noticed that one of the guards near the main building was smoking a cigarette while leaning against a fuel barrel. If she could hit the barrel instead of the guard, it would create a distraction on the opposite side of the compound. The approaching guard would likely investigate the noise, giving the assault team time to breach the gate. "Overwatch is going to create a distraction on the east side," Sarah explained. "When you hear the bang, move immediately." "Understood," Morrison said. "Execute." Sarah shifted her aim from the approaching guard to the fuel barrel near the main building. The shot was more difficult because she would need to hit a smaller target. But the potential payoff was worth the risk. She controlled her breathing, adjusted for wind and distance, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the fuel barrel with a loud clang, followed by the sound of diesel fuel splashing onto the ground. The guard who had been smoking jumped back in alarm and began shouting to his companions. As Sarah had predicted, the approaching guard immediately turned and ran toward the commotion. "Move now," she whispered into her radio. The assault team reacted instantly. Rodriguez detonated his charges, blowing the gate open. Morrison and Thompson rushed through the breach, while Chen provided covering fire. The noise of the explosion masked their entry, and they disappeared into the compound before the guards could react. Sarah kept her scope focused on the compound, looking for threats to her teammates. She could see muzzle flashes from inside the main building as the assault team engaged enemy fighters. Her job was to protect them from external threats and provide support if they needed to extract quickly. "Overwatch, this is 6. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece. "We're taking fire from the second floor of the main building. Can you see the shooter?" "When the cloud on." Sarah scanned the building with her scope, but couldn't get a clear view of the second floor from her current position. The angle was wrong, and there were too many obstacles in the way. -6. I don't have a clear line of sight from this position. "We're pinned down," Morrison replied. "Rodriguez is wounded, and we can't advance." Sarah's mind raced as she considered her options. She could maintain her current position and hope the situation improved, or she could move to a different location that might give her a better angle. Moving would mean leaving her carefully prepared position and potentially exposing herself to enemy fire. Ghost's voice came over the radio. Overwatch. I can see the second-floor window. The shooter is using an automatic weapon. Looks like a PKM machine gun. He's got the assault team pinned behind some concrete barriers. Sarah made a decision that went against everything she had been taught about sniper tactics. Instead of staying in her secure position, she would move to a location that would give her a clear shot at the second floor. It was risky, but her teammates needed help. 6. I'm moving to a better position, she announced. Give me 2 minutes. Martinez, stay where you are, Morrison ordered. That's too dangerous. But Sarah was already packing her equipment. She had spotted a rocky outcrop about 100 meters to her south that would give her a better angle on the main building. The position would be more exposed. But it was the only way she could help her team. Sarah moved quickly but carefully across the hillside, using whatever cover was available. She could hear the sound of gunfire from the compound below, and she knew her teammates were running out of time. When she reached the new position, she immediately set up her rifle and acquired the target. Through her scope, she could see the machine gunner on the second floor. He was positioned behind a window, firing down at Morrison's team. The range was approximately 320 meters, and she would need to account for the elevation difference. Overwatch has eyes on the target, Sarah reported. Taking the shot, she steadied her breathing and placed the crosshairs on the machine gunner's center mass. The shot was challenging because of the angle and the fact that the target was partially concealed behind the window frame. Sarah waited for a moment when the gunner exposed more of his body, then squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the machine gunner in the chest, and he immediately collapsed out of sight. The automatic fire from the second floor stopped. Target down, Sarah announced. You're clear to advance. Outstanding shot, Martinez, Morrison replied. We're moving now. Sarah continued to provide overwatch as the assault team advanced through the compound. She could see them moving from building to building, clearing each structure systematically. Her new position gave her excellent visibility of the entire area, and she was able to identify and eliminate 2 more threats before they could engage her teammates. After 20 minutes of intense fighting, Morrison's voice came over the radio with good news. 6 to all teams. Objective secured. We have the package. And he's alive. Copy, 6, Sarah replied. I can see you moving toward the extraction point. You're clear from my position. But as the assault team began their withdrawal, Sarah noticed movement in the hills to the east. Through her scope, she could see approximately 8 fighters moving to intercept Morrison's team. They were armed with rifles and rocket-propelled grenades, and they would reach the extraction point before the assault team could get there. 6. You have enemy fighters moving to cut off your extraction route, Sarah reported. 8 combatants, armed with small arms and RPGs, approaching from the east. Morrison's response was immediate. How long until they reach the extraction point? Sarah calculated quickly based on the terrain and the speed of the enemy fighters. Approximately 4 minutes, sir. We can't make it in time, Morrison said. Rodriguez is wounded, and we're moving slowly. Can you delay them? Sarah looked at the approaching fighters through her scope. They were spread out in a tactical formation, making it difficult to engage multiple targets quickly. Even if she could take out several of them, the others would likely reach the extraction point and trap Morrison's team. I can try, but there are too many of them for me to stop alone, Sarah said. Ghost Williams's voice came over the radio. Overwatch. What if we coordinate our fire? I can engage the northern group, while you take the southern group. Sarah considered the plan. If she and Ghost could split the enemy force and engage them simultaneously, they might be able to reduce the threat enough for Morrison's team to reach the extraction point safely. That could work, Sarah agreed. On my mark, we engage simultaneously. I'll take targets 1 through 4. You take 5 through 8. Copy, Ghost replied. Ready when you are. Sarah selected her first target and prepared to fire. The key would be speed and accuracy. She would need to engage multiple targets quickly before they could take cover or return fire. Execute, she said into her radio. Sarah and Ghost opened fire simultaneously from their respective positions. Sarah's first shot took down the lead fighter, and she immediately shifted to her second target. Her training took over, and she fell into the rhythm of acquiring targets and firing. Breathe. Aim. Squeeze. Acquire next target. Repeat. In less than 30 seconds, she had eliminated 3 of the enemy fighters. Ghost had been equally successful on his side, taking down 2 targets. The remaining 3 fighters had taken cover behind rocks and trees, but their advance toward the extraction point had been stopped. "Nice shooting, both of you," Morrison said over the radio. "We're almost to the extraction point." Sarah kept her scope focused on the area where the surviving enemy fighters had taken cover. She could see movement behind a large boulder, and she waited patiently for one of them to expose himself. Patience was one of the most important skills for a sniper, and Sarah had learned to wait as long as necessary for the right shot. After 2 minutes, one of the fighters made a mistake. He moved from behind his cover to get a better position, and Sarah was ready. Her shot dropped him immediately, leaving only 2 enemies in the area. "Extraction bird is inbound," Morrison announced. "ETA 3 minutes. Sarah could hear the sound of helicopter rotors in the distance, growing louder as the aircraft approached their position. The mission was almost over, but she couldn't relax yet. The remaining enemy fighters might still try to engage the helicopter with their RPGs. As if reading her thoughts, Ghost's voice came over the radio. "Overwatch, I have movement near those rocks. Looks like someone with an RPG." Sarah quickly scanned the area with her scope and spotted the threat. One of the surviving fighters was indeed preparing to fire an RPG at the incoming helicopter. The weapon could easily bring down the aircraft and kill everyone aboard. "I see him," Sarah said. Taking the shot, the fighter was partially concealed behind a rock formation, with only his head and shoulders visible. It was a difficult shot, especially considering the time pressure. But Sarah didn't hesitate. She placed the crosshairs on the target's center mass and fired. The bullet struck the fighter just as he was raising the RPG to his shoulder. The weapon fell from his hands as he collapsed, eliminating the threat to the helicopter. "Target down," Sarah reported. "Extraction bird should be clear." The UH-60 Black Hawk appeared over the ridge and began its descent to the extraction point. Sarah could see Morrison's team reaching the landing zone, with Tank Thompson helping support the wounded Rodriguez. Doc Turner was already at the extraction point with the vehicles, ready to provide medical assistance. "All teams, this is 6, Morrison announced. "Outstanding work tonight." Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief as she watched her teammates board the helicopter. She had not only completed her first mission with Team 7, but she had exceeded expectations. More importantly, she had helped bring everyone home alive. As Sarah prepared to move to her own extraction point, she reflected on the events of the night. The mission had tested every aspect of her training and forced her to make split-second decisions under intense pressure. She had chosen to move from a secure position to help her teammates, despite the risk to herself. She had coordinated with Ghost to engage multiple targets simultaneously. Most importantly, she had thought creatively about solutions rather than just following standard procedures. The distraction with the fuel barrel had been her idea, and it had allowed the assault team to enter the compound undetected. Moving to a better firing position had been risky, but it had enabled her to eliminate the machine gunner, who was pinning down Morrison's team. Coordinating with Ghost to stop the enemy fighters had saved the mission and possibly prevented casualties. Sarah made her way down the hill toward her own extraction point, where a second helicopter was waiting for her and Ghost. As she walked, she thought about the conversation she had had with Ghost about Stevens always taking the safest shot. Tonight, she had taken calculated risks that benefited the mission and protected her teammates. When she reached the helicopter, Ghost was already aboard. He grinned at her as she climbed in. "Martinez, that was some of the finest shooting I've ever seen. 8 targets eliminated, helicopter saved, mission successful. Not bad for a rookie." Sarah smiled back, feeling exhausted but accomplished. "Thanks, Ghost. I couldn't have done it without your help coordinating that engagement." As the helicopter lifted off, Sarah looked down at the compound where they had just completed their mission. Somewhere in the main building, Intelligence specialists would be gathering information that could prevent future attacks on coalition forces. The bomb maker they had captured would provide valuable intelligence about terrorist networks operating in the region. But more important to Sarah was the knowledge that her teammates were safe. Rodriguez would recover from his wounds, and the entire team would be back in action soon. She had proven that she could do the job when lives were on the line, and she had earned the respect of her fellow SEALs through her actions rather than her words. The flight back to base gave Sarah time to decompress from the intense action of the night. She cleaned her rifle and organized her equipment, falling back into the familiar routines that helped soldiers cope with the stress of combat. But her mind kept returning to the critical moments of the mission when she had to make decisions that affected the lives of her teammates. She thought about the advice Doc Turner had given her about being smart rather than taking unnecessary risks. She had taken risks tonight, but they had been calculated risks based on tactical necessity rather than a desire to prove herself. The difference was important, and she was glad she had understood it when the moment came. As the helicopter approached their base, Sarah could see the lights of the landing pad growing brighter. In a few minutes, she would be back in the safety of friendly territory. There would be a debriefing session where Morrison would analyze every aspect of the mission, identifying what went right and what could be improved. Then there would be time to rest and prepare for the next mission. But for now, Sarah Martinez allowed herself to feel proud of what she had accomplished. She had not only completed her first mission with Team 7, but she had proven that she belonged with the best special operations forces in the world. The men who had called her Barbie and bet against her success would have to revise their opinions. As the helicopter touched down at the base, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning. Team 7 would face many more dangerous missions, and each one would present new challenges and test her abilities in different ways. But tonight had given her confidence that she could handle whatever came next. The real test, however, would come when they returned to the team room, and she had to face Rodriguez, Thompson, Chen, and the others. Their opinions of her abilities had been shaped by prejudice and assumptions rather than first-hand experience. Now they would have to acknowledge what she had accomplished and accept her as a full member of the team. The helicopter engines wound down as Sarah climbed out onto the landing pad at their forward operating base. The pre-dawn air was still cool, and she could see the first hints of sunrise on the eastern horizon. Morrison's team was already being escorted to the medical facility, where Rodriguez would receive treatment for his leg wound. A bullet had grazed his thigh during the firefight, but Doc Turner had confirmed it wasn't serious. Sarah shouldered her rifle and walked across the tarmac toward the operations building. She felt the exhaustion settling into her bones now that the adrenaline was wearing off. But her mind was still sharp and alert. The mission had been a success by any measure, but she knew the real test would come during the debrief when Morrison analyzed every decision and action. As she entered the building, Sarah saw Tank Thompson and Mike Chen waiting in the hallway outside the briefing room. Both men looked tired but alert, the way soldiers always did after returning from a successful mission. When they saw her approaching, their expressions were different than they had been 3 days ago. The hostility was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect. "Martinez," Tank said, nodding toward her. "Hell of a night out there." Chen stepped forward with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "I heard you moved positions in the middle of the mission. That's either really brave or really stupid." Sarah managed a small smile. "Maybe a little of both." "But it worked out." "Yeah, it did," Tank agreed. "Rodriguez is alive because you took out that machine gunner. He knows it too." Before Sarah could respond, Morrison appeared in the doorway of the briefing room. "Martinez, I need to see you first for individual debrief. The rest of you, get some rest. We'll do team debrief at 1,400 hours. Sarah followed Morrison into the briefing room, which was equipped with computers, communications equipment, and large screens for displaying mission data. Morrison gestured for her to sit at the conference table while he pulled up files on his laptop. "Martinez, I want to go through your actions tonight, step by step," Morrison said. "Not because there were any problems, but because this mission showcased some innovative tactical thinking that we need to analyze and potentially incorporate into our standard procedures." Sarah straightened in her chair, unsure whether this was praise or criticism. Yes, sir. Sane. R. Left to. I'm self. Sarah straightened in her chair. I'm Sarah. I'm Sarah. I'm Sarah. Morrison clicked through several screens showing satellite imagery of the mission area. Let's start with your decision to create a distraction, instead of taking the direct shot on the approaching guard. Walk me through your thought process. Sir, I calculated that a direct shot would alert the entire compound and turn the mission into a firefight from the beginning, Sarah explained. The distraction accomplished the same goal of moving the guard away from the team's position, but it maintained the element of surprise for the assault phase. Morrison nodded approvingly. Good analysis. That decision probably saved American lives and ensured mission success. Stevens would have taken the direct shot because it was the safer option from a sniper's perspective, but it wasn't the best option for the team. The commander moved to the next screen, showing Sarah's movement from her original position to the secondary firing point. Now, explain this decision. You abandoned a secure, well-concealed position to move to a location that offered better tactical advantages, but increased your personal risk. Sarah had been thinking about this question during the helicopter ride back to base. Sir, my job isn't just to stay safe and take easy shots. My job is to support the team and ensure mission success. Rodriguez was wounded, and the team was pinned down. The only way I could help was to move to a position where I could eliminate the threat. Morrison studied her face carefully. You realize that moving from your primary position violates standard sniper doctrine? You're supposed to establish a position and maintain it throughout the mission. Yes, sir. I understand the doctrine, Sarah replied. But doctrine should serve the mission, not the other way around. The situation changed, so I adapted. Morrison closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. Martinez, in 15 years of leading SEAL teams, I've seen a lot of snipers come and go. Most of them are technically proficient and follow procedures correctly, but the great ones are the ones who think beyond the textbook and make decisions based on what the mission requires. Sarah wasn't sure how to respond, so she remained silent. Your performance tonight was exceptional, Morrison continued. 8 confirmed kills, including 3 that directly saved team members' lives. You prevented a potential helicopter shootdown and ensured successful extraction of the team and the high-value target. More importantly, you demonstrated the ability to think tactically and adapt to changing circumstances. Morrison stood up and walked to the window overlooking the base. I'm recommending you for a Bronze Star for your actions tonight, but more than that, I'm confirming you as the permanent sniper for Team 7. The probationary period is over. Sarah felt a surge of emotion that she struggled to control. Thank you, sir. I won't let the team down. You already proved that, Morrison said. Now get some rest. The team debrief this afternoon will be interesting. Sarah left the briefing room and made her way to her quarters, passing several base personnel who nodded respectfully in her direction. Word of the mission's success had already spread through the base, and she could feel the difference in how people looked at her. She was no longer the new female SEAL who might or might not work out. She was a proven operator who had contributed to a successful mission. In her quarters, Sarah cleaned her weapons and equipment before allowing herself to lie down on her bunk. Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come immediately. Her mind kept replaying the events of the mission, analyzing her decisions and thinking about what she could have done differently. It was a habit that all good soldiers developed, constantly learning and improving from each experience. She thought about her brother and the promise she had made after his funeral. Tonight, she had been the person providing accurate intelligence and protective fires for the assault team. She had helped prevent other families from losing someone they loved, just as she had hoped to do when she first decided to become a SEAL. Sarah finally fell asleep as the sun was rising over the Afghan mountains. When she woke up 6 hours later, she felt refreshed and ready for whatever came next. She showered, changed into a clean uniform, and made her way to the mess hall for lunch before the team debrief. The mess hall was busy with soldiers from various units discussing their own missions and duties. As Sarah got her food and looked for a place to sit, She noticed Tank Thompson waving her over to a table where he was sitting with Chen and Doc Turner. She approached cautiously, still not entirely sure how the team dynamics would work now that she had proven herself in combat. "Martinez, sit down," Tank said. "We've been talking about last night." Sarah took a seat across from them. "What about it?" Doc Turner leaned forward with a serious expression. "We owe you an apology. All of us made assumptions about your capabilities based on things that had nothing to do with your actual skills." Chen nodded in agreement. "I was wrong about you being here for political reasons. Nobody gets lucky enough to make 8 kills in one mission. That was pure skill and tactical thinking." Tank cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Look, Martinez, I've been in the teams for 12 years, and I've seen a lot of new guys come and go. Most of them try to prove themselves by taking crazy risks or showing off. You did something different. You made smart decisions that helped the team accomplish the mission." Sarah appreciated their words, but she also understood the importance of not letting success go to her head. "I appreciate that, but I was just doing my job. We all were." "No," Doc said firmly. "You went above and beyond. Rodriguez knows you saved his life, and we all know you saved the mission. That means something in this community." Ghost Williams appeared at their table with his lunch tray. "Mind if I join the love fest?" he said with a grin. Tank gestured to an empty chair. "We were just telling Martinez that she's earned her place on the team." Ghost sat down and looked directly at Sarah. "Martinez, can I tell you something? Last night, when you coordinated with me to engage those fighters at the extraction point, that was some of the best tactical communication I've ever experienced. You saw the situation, came up with a plan, and executed it flawlessly under pressure." Sarah felt herself blushing slightly. "You made it easy by being in the right position and shooting straight. That's what I'm talking about," Ghost said. "You're not trying to take credit for everything, or make yourself look good. You understand that this is a team sport." Chen leaned back in his chair. "So what's it like being the first woman on an operational SEAL team? The media is going to want to interview you when word gets out about this mission." Sarah shook her head firmly. "I'm not interested in media attention. I'm here to do a job, not to be a symbol or a spokesperson for anyone." Tank nodded approvingly. "Good attitude. The best operators are the ones nobody knows about." Doc Turner checked his watch. "We should probably head to the briefing room. Morrison likes to start these debriefs exactly on time." The team members gathered their trays and walked together toward the operations building. Sarah noticed that the dynamics between them had changed significantly since before the mission. There was an ease and camaraderie that hadn't existed before, the kind of bond that formed when soldiers had been through combat together and proven they could trust each other. When they entered the briefing room, Morrison was already there with Rodriguez, who was using crutches but appeared to be in good spirits despite his wounded leg. The explosives expert smiled when he saw Sarah enter the room. "Martinez," Rodriguez said. "I heard you put on quite a show last night after I got hit." "Just doing my job," Sarah replied. "How's the leg?" Rodriguez shrugged. "Doc says I'll be back to full duty in 2 weeks. Could have been a lot worse if you hadn't taken out that machine gunner when you did." Morrison called the meeting to order. "Gentlemen and lady, last night's mission was a complete success. We accomplished all primary and secondary objectives with minimal friendly casualties and no civilian casualties. The high-value target is providing valuable intelligence, and the bomb-making facility has been destroyed." The commander activated the large screen and began displaying mission data. "Let's go through this systematically, starting with the insertion and approach phase." For the next hour, Morrison analyzed every aspect of the mission in detail. He praised the team's coordination during the approach and breach, noting how well they had worked together despite having a new team member. He highlighted Sarah's innovative use of the distraction technique and her decision to reposition for better tactical advantage. "Martinez, your actions last night demonstrated the kind of tactical flexibility and creative thinking that makes the difference between good teams and great teams," Morrison said. "You didn't just follow the plan. You improved it based on real-time conditions." Rodriguez spoke up from his position near the back of the room. "Commander, I want to say something about Martinez's performance. When I got hit, and we were pinned down, I was sure we were in serious trouble. That machine gunner had us cold, and we couldn't advance or retreat. When Martinez took him out, she basically saved all our lives. Tank Thompson added his own perspective. Sir, I've worked with a lot of snipers over the years, and most of them are focused on their own performance metrics. Martinez was thinking about what the team needed, even if it meant putting herself at greater risk. Morrison nodded. That's exactly the kind of team-first attitude that makes SEAL teams effective. Individual skill is important, but it's meaningless without the ability to work as part of a larger unit. The commander moved to the next phase of the analysis, discussing the extraction and the threat posed by the enemy fighters with RPGs. He showed how Sarah and Ghost had coordinated their fires to neutralize multiple targets simultaneously, preventing the enemy from interfering with the helicopter extraction. This coordination between Overwatch positions was textbook perfect, Morrison said. Williams and Martinez identified the threat, communicated effectively, and executed a coordinated engagement that eliminated the danger to the extraction aircraft. Ghost raised his hand. Sir, I want to point out that the coordination was Martinez's idea. She saw the tactical situation and came up with the plan on the spot. Morrison looked at Sarah with what might have been pride. Is that accurate, Martinez? Sarah felt uncomfortable being the center of attention. But she answered honestly. Yes, sir. I could see that there were too many targets for one sniper to handle effectively, so coordinating our fires seemed like the logical solution. Logical, Morrison repeated. That's exactly right. You analyzed the problem, developed a solution, and implemented it successfully. That's the kind of tactical thinking we need from all team members. After the formal debrief concluded, Morrison asked Sarah to stay behind, while the others left to prepare for their next training cycle. When they were alone, the commander's expression became more personal. Martinez, I want you to understand something, Morrison said. This team has been through a lot together. They've lost friends. They've been in situations where they had to depend completely on each other to survive. When you joined us, they weren't just worried about your capabilities as a woman. They were worried about bringing in anyone new who might not be able to handle the pressure. Sarah nodded. I understand that, sir. I knew I had to prove myself. But you did more than just prove yourself. Morrison continued. You showed them that you're not just competent. You're an asset. You bring skills and perspectives that make the entire team better. Morrison walked to his desk and picked up a folder. I've been authorized to offer you a choice. You can stay with Team 7 permanently, or you can transfer to the training command to help develop programs for integrating women into special operations units. Sarah didn't hesitate. I want to stay with Team 7, sir. This is what I trained for. Morrison smiled. I thought you'd say that. The team wants you to stay too, by the way. Rodriguez specifically requested that you remain as our sniper. As Sarah left the briefing room, she reflected on how much had changed in just 24 hours. 3 days ago, she had been the unwanted rookie who was only on the team because of politics. Now she was a proven operator who had earned her place through performance under fire. Walking across the base toward her quarters, Sarah encountered several soldiers who congratulated her on the successful mission. Word had spread quickly through the military community that the first female SEAL had not only completed her first combat mission, but had performed exceptionally well. Later that evening, Sarah found herself in the team room where the members of Team 7 gathered to relax and prepare for future missions. The atmosphere was completely different from her first day. Instead of suspicious glances and whispered comments, she was included naturally in conversations and planning discussions. Tank Thompson was cleaning his weapons at one of the tables when he looked up at Sarah. Martinez, can I ask you something? Sure, Sarah replied. What was going through your mind when you decided to move from your original sniper position? I mean, you gave up a perfectly good hide site to move into a more exposed location. Sarah thought carefully before answering. I was thinking about the mission and what the team needed. My job isn't to stay safe. It's to help the team accomplish the objective and come home alive. Rodriguez, who was sitting nearby with his wounded leg elevated, nodded approvingly. That's exactly the right answer. Too many people in special operations get focused on their own survival instead of mission success. Doc Turner joined the conversation from across the room. The thing is, Martinez understood that sometimes you have to take calculated risks to achieve the overall goal. That's the difference between individual heroics and professional competence. Ghost Williams looked up from the map he was studying. What impressed me most was how quickly you adapted to changing circumstances. Most people get locked into their original plan and can't adjust when the situation changes. Sarah appreciated the feedback, but she also wanted to learn from their experiences. What advice would you give me for future missions? What should I work on? Morrison entered the team room at that moment and overheard her question. That's exactly the right attitude, Martinez. The best operators are always trying to improve. The commander sat down at the table. Since you asked, I'll give you some feedback. Your technical skills are excellent, probably the best pure marksmanship I've seen. Your tactical thinking is outstanding, and your ability to adapt under pressure is impressive. If I had to identify areas for improvement, I'd say continue working on your knowledge of enemy tactics and weapon systems. Chen spoke up from his position at the communications equipment. Also, spend more time learning about the different types of missions we do. Last night was a direct action mission, but we also do reconnaissance, hostage rescue, and counter-terrorism operations. Each type requires different approaches. Tank added his own suggestion. And work on your physical conditioning. Not because you're not in good shape, you obviously are, but because special operations puts demands on your body that regular military training doesn't prepare you for. Sarah listened carefully to all their suggestions, making mental notes about areas where she could improve. She had achieved her goal of earning acceptance from Team 7, but she understood that this was just the beginning of her career as a Navy SEAL. As the evening went on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Stories about previous missions, jokes about military bureaucracy, and plans for when they returned to the United States. Sarah found herself relaxing and enjoying the camaraderie that she had watched from the outside for so long. Rodriguez raised a bottle of water in a mock toast to Martinez, who proved that the best man for the job might be a woman. The other team members laughed and raised their own bottles. Sarah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the Afghan heat. She had found her place among warriors who judged her by her actions rather than her gender. Later that night, as Sarah prepared for bed, she thought about the path that had brought her to this point. The years of training, the doubts from others and from herself, the pressure of being the first woman to attempt what she had accomplished. All of it had led to this moment, when she was finally accepted as a full member of one of the military's most elite units. She thought about her brother and wished he could have seen her prove that his death had not been in vain. Through her actions with Team 7, she was helping to prevent other families from experiencing the loss that had motivated her to become a SEAL in the first place. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new missions. There would be times when she would have to prove herself all over again to new people who had heard about her but hadn't seen her in action. The media attention that she wanted to avoid would probably find her eventually, bringing both positive and negative scrutiny. But tonight, Sarah Martinez could rest knowing that she had accomplished something historic. She had not only become the first woman to serve on an operational SEAL team, but she had proven that gender was irrelevant when it came to courage, skill, and dedication to mission and teammates. As she drifted off to sleep in her small quarters at the forward operating base, Sarah smiled at the memory of Rodriguez's comment about her outsmarting the veterans. In the end, it hadn't been about outsmarting anyone. It had been about proving that she belonged among the best warriors in the world, and that her contributions could make everyone around her better and safer. The rookie who had been laughed at just days before was now a proven member of Team 7, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.